Is the president stuck between a rock and a hard place in Syria? We're going to break all that down for you and more on today's Hot Zone.
This is the Hot Zone. Engaging with the news in a whole new way, international war correspondent Chuck Holton brings insight into areas of crisis and lets you help those affected.
Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. I got to get this done quick because the rain is coming in. I don't want to get struck by lightning here, but we've got a lot to talk about today. First of all, you may have seen on the news that the Turks have now started shelling into Syria. They've started the long-awaited attack that everybody was fearing, but so far I haven't seen any evidence of ground troops moving across the border. That would be the next real bad red line that we'd have to watch out for. We're going to talk about that a little bit more, but we're also going to talk about the 800,000 or so people in California who are going without power tonight. And that's because PG&E, the power company out there, really has not been able to upgrade their equipment. And so they're really afraid that their power infrastructure is going to cause more fires like we saw last year that killed more than 40 people. So first, let's go back to Syria. Now, the Turks are moving their troops up to the border and they're starting to shell across the border. And you have to understand, here's the thing from the Turkish perspective. The PKK are this faction of the Kurdish troops, Peshmerga, who have conducted terror attacks into Turkey. There's no two ways about that. The U.S. State Department classifies the PKK as a terror organization. I myself actually got arrested by the PKK one time for taking pictures of a sunset, and that was not fun. So the Turks do have a point that, hey, some of these fighters that are part of the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, are PKK. And PKK is a straight up communist organization. They would love nothing more than to make that part of Syria, Rojava, into a kind of a communist state. And so that's bad. However, the PKK are a very small part of the Peshmerga. The SDF is made up of Syrian Kurds and Iraqi Kurds and probably some Turkish Kurds as well. And most of them are YPG. YPG is much friendlier to Western sentiments. They are not communist per se, and they're not terrorists. And we know a lot of them. And yeah, we talked about this yesterday. 11,000 SDF fighters were killed in the fight against ISIS, they say. That's a lot. And these guys ought to get something out of that. So that's one reason why everybody's kind of up in arms about the fact that the president has sort of abandoned these people. They paid the price to conquer ISIS. The president likes to strut around and beat his chest and say that the United States conquered ISIS. The United States did not conquer ISIS. The United States assisted the Kurds in conquering ISIS. That's all there is to it. And so the Kurds ought to have a seat at the table when it comes to deciding what happens to that part of the world afterwards. Now, the Turks have said that they want a 30-kilometer zone from their border south into Syria that is free of Kurdish troops. The Kurds have been right up to the Turkish border. I was there and literally saw Kurdish positions within a stone's throw of the Turkish border. So the Turks have said, no, we want a 30-kilometer buffer zone. The U.S. was apparently negotiating for, okay, how about 19 kilometers? But the Turks wouldn't go for that. And so now the Turks are taking their 30 kilometers. That's really what they're doing. And what would be another real bad red line would be if they continued after that to move south. If they took that 30 kilometers and then kept moving south, that would be really, really bad and probably would be a catalyst for the U.S. getting back involved again. I want you to hear first what the UN had to say about this incursion and their concerns, a couple minutes from one of their representatives in Switzerland, talking about the UN hoping that the Turks will respect human rights in the process of doing this. Check it out.
We don't know what is going to happen, and of course we are in contact with all parties, with all governments, to everybody to raise these issues, and that's where I'm raising my voice also with you today, to ask everybody to make sure that these humanitarian concerns are taken into account as things may happen or evolve in the coming days or weeks. Our call is that following this announcement that the planners, the military, does need to take into account the fact that this is an area which it's the most dense part of the Northeast. There is hundreds of thousands of people who live in this area, depending on how wide that belt, how deep it will be. We don't have the answers on that. To be able to make sure that the basic rule of conflict, or if you want the military engages with military. So the ask for all parties, for everybody, governments and non-state actors, is to put people first, to think of people and to make a people plan. We'll be very happy to, of course, we're in full contact with everybody to explain where we have humanitarian operations, where are the clinics or the schools or the water points or the markets or the residential areas, and any other operation taking place to stay away from civilian people. We're worried about it. That's why we have a preparedness plan. That's why we talk to governments and everybody. That's why we raise our concerns about what will happen. I hope as we go through to be able to get some more light, some more details into the nitty-gritty parts of the operation. What would it look like? What would it entail? How it would be applied is also important. From experience, communicating with communities, engaging on the ground is really vital to answer questions. At the moment, the people on the ground are the ones who have the most of the questions about what would it actually mean for their lives.
Okay, and now this is another really interesting interview. It was the Turkish ambassador to the UK talking about Turkey's plans in this and why they sort of feel like they have been, abandoned. They say that, all the news is about abandoning the Kurds. Well, the Turks say we've been abandoned in this by the United States because the United States agreed to certain things with us, and then those things did not happen. They kept kicking the can, as this guy says. Listen to what he has to say.
For Manbij, for northern Syria, we made many deals with Americans, and also there were commitments by them to clean those areas and to create safe zones. And we did many negotiations, and we started some implementation of some commitments, but it didn't go anywhere. And these exercises turned into a kick in a can exercise. And then our patience ran out, and now we are determined to create a safe zone at our border for our national security and for Syrians, to save them from the oppression and cruelty of terrorist organizations. Time to time, when we are reading some news and some comments, I feel that some words, some concepts of ally or betrayal are being used very wrongly, or maybe they are being used deliberately, I don't know. But who is ally? Who is betraying who? These are very important questions, and I think the concepts should be used fairly and correctly when the issue is related with a NATO ally, Turkey, and Turkish nation's security. And we are expecting our allies to support Turkish security concerns and Turkish national border security. Because of that reason, we don't want to feel betrayed or abandoned when we are struggling against terrorists. So far, according to this possible operation, we did not talk, but we have talked this issue in the past, especially if these foreign terrorist fighters are in Turkey. They are providing consular services to them, and also according to that joint declaration of intent, if those terrorists are in Turkey, we can deport them, and also they have commitment to prevent those fighters to leave this country. I mean, we have a cooperation mechanism if those terrorists are in Turkey. I think we can be creative, and we can find some new mechanisms for cooperation.
So here's something I want to point out. Donald Trump is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place here, because here's the thing. Everybody knows Erdogan is straight up Muslim Brotherhood. He's an ISIS sympathizer at the very least, a supporter at the worst. There are members who were fighting for ISIS that are now fighting for the Turks against the Kurds. And that's really super bad. But since Turkey's been a NATO ally for so long, and if we alienate the Turks, to the extent we alienate the Turks, they go right into the arms of Russia, and it gives Russia more power in that region. So Donald Trump really can't afford to alienate the Turks too bad, but at the same time, we have a moral responsibility to the Kurds, and unfortunately, it looks like our political ramifications of losing the Turks are winning out in that conflict. That's really sad. I get it. We don't want the Russians to have greater influence in that region, and so we want to keep the Turks on our side, but the Turks are playing us in that. They're going, hey, you either give us what we want or we'll go get it from the Russians. And Iran is sitting back going, all right, this is great. So it's not a good situation any way you slice it. I want to also play this clip that this analyst was talking about some of the problems or some of the reasoning behind what Trump is doing. Take a listen.
Turkey is the fundamental power in the region. It is a very long-standing ally of the United States. There's been huge tension between the two countries. Clearly, Trump wants to go beyond that tension, and he's willing to sacrifice the Kurds, at least partly, in that pursuit. It's not an irrational geopolitical move, and how he handled it internally, well, ultimately, that's a decision of the president. But in the end, what they're trying to do, what the Turks are trying to do, is place military force along their border. Through the long Syrian civil war, their border has been sometimes porous, sometimes under attack from ISIS, sometimes from Syrian forces. The Turks want to secure that border. They're not going to be very nice about it.
Okay, so depending on whether or not Turkey starts sending ground troops into Syria, I may be on an airplane this weekend headed to Syria. And if so, I'll be bringing you the news from there. Be praying for me as we decide whether or not to go. Let's move on, though, and let's just talk for a few minutes about the fires or potential fires out in California. PG&E, the power cooperative in Northern California, has now shut down much of their power infrastructure, which puts about 800,000 people in the dark. This is what some of those people had to say about that.
It's just kind of scary. It feels like worse than Y2K. It's like we don't know how long. We don't know if we're actually affected. My two kids, their school situation keeps moving every second. It's not clear like if we need to pack for like a week and go out of town or what to do. So I'm just trying to make sure we have water and like food and charging stations and gas, I guess. Okay. That's so funny.
So these fires are a real issue. It's a real problem up there. And as you probably know, more than 40 people died in last year's major fires in Paradise, California, Chico, California, in that area.
Just picking up some last minute water supplies because I realized the implications of the power being off. I just heard that actually tap water may be off when the power goes off. So I want to prepare. Just we don't know how many days it's going to be. So
I don't think that you can really blame PG&E for not wanting the liability of starting any more of those fires. They had to declare bankruptcy. It's like $11 billion judgment or something against them, and they just had to declare bankruptcy because of all the liability they had from the last ones. So they're going, you know what? If you're going to sue the pants office, we're just not even going to wear pants. So there. That's basically what it comes down to. However, I think it's also very instructive for anybody, whether you live in a fire-prone area or not. There are 1,000 different reasons why you could be without power, water, internet, light, who knows what, this time tomorrow. And you just can't plan for those things. But you can prepare for them. So you should be prepared. You shouldn't have to run to Walmart and fight old ladies over the last loaf of bread if something like this were to happen. You shouldn't be waiting in a line 500 cars long at the gas station because you don't have any gas in your car. You ought to think about that beforehand. That's what men do. We plan and prepare for the future. We look ahead and we, walk point for our families. So I would highly encourage you to think about those potentials, the potential things, the threats that could affect your family, and get prepared for those. All right, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching The Hot Zone. We got lots more good reporting coming for you. I have an amazing, amazing interview for you, a special thing we're going to do for you tomorrow. So be sure to be back here. All right, talk to you later.
The Hot Zone is produced by Amy Holton and Livefire Media. Copyright 2019.